Hi, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about my terracing. I'm only going to make a few points and then I want you to put in the comments your questions. So if you want me to do some more yapping about it, at least I can specifically address your questions. And I'm starting from the top of the area in the deer fence, which is like the top of the terracing area. I'm going to work my way down a little bit. When you garden on a slope, you channel your Spider-Man, and so you do like this balancing act when you're trying to weed or plant into it, and I would say it's not so bad if you don't mind that it's a workout. I'd say the worst part about gardening on a slope is that if you have a bucket with you because you're putting your weeds in the bucket or for whatever other reason, or you have some chicken poo that you're trying to spread, you can't balance it's really hard to balance your bucket when it's on a slope. It wants to fall over, and you might be cursing a little bit there as things fall out of your bucket. So I try to do things like if I see a plant has fallen over or something, I'll try to balance my bucket against the plant so it can stay straight up. So as we're looking at the top terraced area, I would say the number one question would be, how did you do it? And that's an easy answer because somebody else did it. I think if you have real slopey land, you want to get somebody with an excavator. They know how to look at the angles, the slopes, and they know how to move the earth on contour or whatever would be the most efficient way. There is a hill on the property that is too slopey. So I would say maybe Sepulcher can deal with that. The land by the house was less steep. So why is it cut this way, and not some other angle? I don't know, that's what the dude chose to do. Maybe because of the way the land kind of sloped that way. And so he cut it in terraces that way. There's less weeds here, less growth here. You could see that there's some grasses that came in. And as I look at it, I'm just happy that it's not quackgrass. It's just like it's like a smaller grass. So it's easy to manage comparatively. But over on this side is super duper weedy. There's maybe like 3 or 4 things I've planted into it, and the rest of it is just weeds that just need to get chopped and dropped. Thistles and thimbles and docks. Oh my. The person who's going to terrace your land, he's going to move the earth. And so the areas, so I could tell that he must have moved earth from here to here. And so the fertility got taken from over here and it got moved over there, or the topsoil. And so you have pockets like that when you terrace. And what makes it particularly annoying is that, while you're doing it, is you want to garden mostly on the flat areas. And the flat areas are the areas that have the least amount of fertility, because that area, to make it flat, it was all carved into, and then the fertility was like thrown onto the slope to make, it slope a certain way. The exercise on a slope would be the first point. Second point would be varying levels of fertility and the need to build your soil, in particular when that happens in those areas with less fertility. But I'd say the third point is you got to be really mindful of where you're going to put your access points, your pathways. It actually is like a V. So it comes this way and to the stump, and then it comes out that way. And so if you walking along the fence, right, there's obviously an access point. You want to be able to walk around the fence, right? So there is like a path there, and then there's a path up way on that side of the fence. But you don't want to have to, if I come up here, I don't want to have to walk all the way around to get up there. So that's why I came down this center part, right? So that's why I focused on chopping this area first, because this was the pathway down the middle. And you could do things like hardscape that. I don't have any money or time for that right now. Maybe make an area that's a little bit less steep that you can go up. When I have a flat terrace like this, what I've done is I'll plant, typically it's like 7, if it's this long, it's like 7 trees along it, but there's some shorter areas on the bottom that have like 4 trees. So I'll have like one edge that has trees and the other one is a pathway, and then each tree will be like a guild that has little things in it. And one day I'll do a tour that shows what's in my guilds, and that would be a forever video, but I don't know. But you can see, I'm just gonna dive right in the bottom right there, and there's see, there's some plants underneath it, but each tree, more and more I put plants underneath it. And then you have different kind of plants for your slopey areas. But back in the day I decided that this slope would be currants, and then I discovered how much I liked blueberries, so I put in lots of blueberries. So it's like lots of perennials. I mean, I put perennials everywhere, but I'm going to focus my vegetables on the flat areas. My big perennial shrubs, you know, I should not try to waste so much of it on those flat areas, you know, this pristine real estate, and I should focus my shrubs in the more poor access areas or slopey areas. I'll put ornamentals on my slopes because I don't need to visit them a whole lot. Here is a new kind of rose. Another thing that I'm focusing a lot on is slope stabilizing plants. So am I going to plant a carrot on a slope that I'm constantly disturbing as I'm harvesting it, or should I put in a sea kale? So it is a vegetable, but it's something that's always going to stay in the ground, and it's going to actually, you know, and the perennial brassicas actually can have very extensive root systems, like the arugula rocket, the Turkish rocket, and the sea kale are types of brassicas that have extensive deep tap roots. So you can put your perennial brassicas in your slopey areas to stabilize it, and it's not something that you're going to disturb. You're just going to pick from it. So you can do a vegetable in your slopey areas, but it's one that you just want to pick off and not like have to pull out. So, and here is a bay leaf. So again, some kind of like a permanent fixture on a slope. Of course, when the birds plant the elderberries, I just let them stay. The birds like to plant the Indian plums and the elderberries, the red elderberries. They go where the birds put them. This is an area that wasn't disturbed. If there's some area that with native plants that the worker can avoid, he can leave like a patch of native plants. So if you have things like the maidenhair ferns with the black stems, man, if you can keep those and you can keep Oregon grape and salal, there's so many like native plants that I wanted to preserve, and these obviously the sword ferns. So those are all areas that it got preserved because he was able to move around, work around them. So you want to focus on what are some things I can keep in my landscape because I want it to display native plants. But even in this area with these natives, here's like the inside out flower, also nice native. Right here, right in the middle of it. So even if you mulch the disturbed areas, you're gonna have these Himalayan blackberries coming in right in the middle of your native plants because all they want is light. It's not just disturbing the ground. I did a video, I think it was the Living on the Edge video, that showed that all the weeds need is light. So they got light and they come in, and all these, because right like this, that slope way up there and that hill outside the deer fence, and those are all growing Himalayans as well, not because the plants were removed, but because the upper canopy, the thing that was blocking the light, was removed. So all they needed was light, and all of those weed seeds germinated in between the native plants. So you have to worry not just about the areas that were disturbed, but all the areas. You got to watch them for invasives that you never had to do before. You know, if you were working with raw land, and maybe most people aren't working with that, and you got the weed pressures anyway. This area is like less slopey, so I decided to treat it like a flat area and put some vegetables in here. So you can see, so it's kind of like the terrace kind of extended like this way a little bit before it dropped. But I still put, you know, blueberries in here as well. Another thing to worry about when you're on a slope is trees like to bend over, and they're gonna bend over more on being planted on a slope than they are on flat ground. You know, obviously when you're planting the trees, you're orienting them straight up, but they will want to lean anyway. And I try to do this cheap, you know, or free bamboo method, and it's just not, because I have this growing on my property, but it's just not, you know, it's not sturdy enough. I need to put in some metal stakes in here. Also, you don't want to put string on it. You want to do something that's more gentle when you're holding it up. But yeah, and then as they get big, it's harder to balance them with the tiny little weak stake. But this happens a lot with strawberry trees or any tree. My apples are now, I have some apples that are fruiting for the first time, and now they're wanting to lean over. Even the ones, I guess, that are on flat land are leaning over, but it's more of a problem when they're on a slope, or it tends to happen more when it's on a slope. I am going to do another video that talks about the weed that I spread with the terracing. Here are zone 1 garden beds. There's a weed that I'm smothering here. That's why they're not in use right now. This is a slope, and there is broken concrete that enabled me to kind of use them as beds. And some areas, like the top 2 beds, they had native crap soil in them, so I have to just build it with my mulching techniques and, you know, KNF Jadam kind of techniques. And the other ones down here, I had to bring a bunch of soil to fill them, right? Because the land was you know, obviously more steep here. So when the broken concrete got in here, I needed to fill them. And I think it was mostly mushroom compost that I brought in. And so obviously in my first years, there was more fertility in the soil that I brought than the ones on top that had the native soil in them. This is the steepest part of my property within the deer fence. This is the area that I was working on the other day that gave me super sore thighs right now. So the slope has to be kind of like this to really get you a workout, I think. I don't know if you can really see that. I'd say the funnest thing about the slope, besides getting sore legs, is when you've got different elevation, you can think about, there's my Shapova. In 15 years, when it finally fruits, because they're notoriously late to fruit, like maybe it'll get like this tall. And this is a really bad example because it's actually kind of far down in there, but I can just reach the fruit from where I'm on the higher ground. And actually I have some mulberries that I planted way down there outside the deer fence, right next to like this huge drop off on this hill comes down, and it whoosh. So I'm like, if I'm up there, I can like pick the mulberries from on top because they're like notoriously tall. Kind of see where that huge maple. So these maples were cut down, and so they resprout, and so they're like these big puffs of maples. It's kind of funny. Oh, and I'm just remembering another point. When you're gardening on a slope, is you notice a succession of ripening. So things, it's like weeds and certain things will start down here because it must be like the hottest right here. So the season starts the first here, and then it moves up. Depending on what you're growing, you can do like a successional harvest, because you know things will ripen in the lowest, hottest areas and then slowly kind of move up. If I have wine caps that I'm growing there, they will fruit there first, and when I'm done with that harvest, then they'll fruit here and then up there and up, 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 up. Because of this steep slope drop off, you might see like soil erosion going on. So I was trying to use some rocks to stabilize, and then put it like a perennial vegetable in there to see maybe like the roots can hold it up. So you do think about things like that. You try different methods, and again, you can, especially if you're a dry farmer, use your weeds to kind of mulch around your plants and that with the wood chips will keep the water in, hopefully. So now I'm going to stop. Put your questions into the comments, and I will address them in another video.